I understand that people think that the legal information we got is a threat or whatever, but under the Act, and I think it was similar before, it's not the government, it's other organizations that could take us individually to court. Could you explain that, please?
Well, you know, the intent of getting the legal opinion was not to put it forward as a threat. It was to provide you with information in your decision making. But there is the opportunity, in fact, the opportunity existed before the regulations were put in place, where a third-party organization could, in fact, take legal action against the CRD. And there are examples of where a third party has, in fact, taken a municipal organization to court over regulations.
You indicated, Jack, that the funding is directly tied to Amendment 8. Amendment 8 is the plan. And so my question to you is, how fixed is that? Because what I'm hearing from you is it is fixed.
If we can find a cheaper location, less capital cost, then we'll have no difficulty getting that changed. But the concept of liquids treatment, secondary treatment, biosolids processing, that's key elements of the plan, and that is not going to change.
So I'm confused, because what you're saying is Amendment 8 is what we're doing, and that's fixed. But it's not fixed, and we have to change it anyways. So there's flexibility in looking at the plan to possibly do a better plan.
That's all.
Am I not right?
Well, it depends what you mean by a better plan. I mean,
Well, the question is, there is flexibility in this plan to make changes from what you're saying.
The only item that we've discussed as changing would be the location of the biosolids facility. The commitment is to put in place a biosolids processing facility.
But that plan is not fixed as of now, so that there can be change.
The changes in the location.
There can
only.
be change.
That's the only item.
Thank you.
As you know, we've had lots of comments about a bad plan. We're certainly, the procurement process will look at the private sector to come up with whatever process is appropriate to bring innovation to the table. So if there is a better plan out there, I'm sure when it's brought forward, it'll get appropriate consideration. But we're providing a base plan at this point, and we'll be going out to the private sector to refine that and improve it, and that's our expectation.
I will move the motion. If there's a seconder, I'll speak. I'll speak to it.
Okay, moved and seconded.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of my motion, I do wish to make it clear that I'm in favor of moving to sewage treatment, and I always have been. The question, though, is a matter of when and with what plan and what technology. In this respect, I have very considerable concerns about moving forward with the current project, both in the timing and the project itself. This is an extremely expensive project for this region. Undertaking it will, without question, have huge consequences for the region. The first thing, therefore, that we really should be deciding if there is a pressing need that mandates we take immediate action. First of all, is there a health risk? The answer is very likely no. Dr. Stanwyck, the Chief Medical Health Officer for the region, and other medical health officers of prominence, past and present, have indicated that any health risks associated with the current practice are very small, if they're at all. And Dr. Stanwyck in particular has indicated that it would be very far down his list of high priorities in terms of health initiatives for the region, and has suggested that pollution from stormwater outfalls likely represents a considerably greater health risk in this region, and he has been consistent with saying that. So secondly then, is there a significant environmental risk or environmental impact around the outfalls? Is there some change? Is there some damage? Yes. And in an ideal world, would we like to correct that? Of course. But the answer is, in terms of really large environmental problems, very likely no. As members of this committee know, there has been a long period of CRD monitoring that has consistently shown, at worst, very limited damage, and over time, in terms of metals and some other contaminants, an improving situation around the outfalls. And that's been clearly established. The one issue that has been brought to our attention in what we received in January 2012 was a change and reduction in the benthic community, mussels and elsewise, around the Macaulay outfall. However, the same change wasn't found around the Clover Point outfall, and yet similar changes were found in other locations in Puget Sound and Georgia Strait, far from any point source of pollution. Staff said there was need for much more investigation, but their suggestion was this looked more like a global effect in the ocean, possibly related to effects of climate change or something of that nature. Virtually every significant study done in these waters has indicated from 1994 on, and that was 1994, was led by UBC and the University of Washington, that looked at the incidence of pollution in Puget Sound and indicated that the sewage outfalls from Victoria probably had a negligible effect to that. That the big concern was industrial runoff from the city of Seattle and to a lesser degree the city of Vancouver. And a whole list of other studies have found very limited effects of Victoria's sewage situation. I don't think it's sufficient to say, well, other levels of government mandated us and then follow without question. Ultimately, the federal and provincial governments certainly have the authority to tell us that we have to do it. And in the end, if they do, we have to follow that. There's no question. And the legal implications have been well explained. I don't think there's anything in there that says we don't have a right to question the application of those rules. In terms of the federal government, they are using what is a bureaucratically simple method of evaluation, simply on the volumes that we have, without any examination really of what is happening actually in the receiving waters. That should be seen as unacceptable. You know, plain and simple. The UVic scientists at the time looked and had problems with the methodology of the report. But beyond that, the authors of the report themselves said this is a preliminary investigation. Much more extensive investigation should take place. We should push back on that and say we believe the provincial order was an error. We want a more exact, is this in fact a major problem? And in terms of the effect on the environment, while there have been no definitive studies yet, the CTAC report, the Golder report, Dr. Stanwyck's information and others, and UVic environmental law have given a very strong indication that there is far more detrimental effect from the stormwater outfalls, which are really numerous and discharge very close to shore, than there is from the sewer outfall. And by the way, an awful lot of the emerging chemicals wind up in the stormwater, not in the sanitary sewer. If we have the situation where stormwater potentially produces a much bigger problem, why are we spending an awful lot of money on the smaller problem and doing very little about the larger one? I think that's a reasonably legitimate question. If we then make the assumption that there is a reason to move right now, and I don't think that there is, then the question is this the right project coming from the right planning process? And I have a lot of concerns about that. First of all, the process of originally establishing the design. An assumption was made right at the start, confirmed by staff in 2008, that the project would be designed around the existing system we had. It was designed to collect sewage from all around the region and pump it to two oceans because that's where you would dispose of it. We had an original request for expressions of interest. It was not opened up to all possible outcomes. It was restricted to those outcomes that would fit into the project we had in mind. There were submissions, at least one, that was intended to look at a resource recovery-based system in this region. It was disqualified, and it did not fit the terms of reference. We have never looked at, in this committee, alternate designs and alternate possibilities. We did look at the path forward with more or less satellite plants, 3, 7, 11, I believe. And of course, I think if you're going to build a central plant anyhow, it's being pretty obvious which one would be cheaper. Having done that, we had a matrix to compare the benefits socially, economically, and financially of the three options. Number one being the path forward. Number two, one with 7 satellite plants. The number 2 option finished very narrowly behind the number 1. I think it was 1 point in difference in the matrix. I looked at the matrix factors, and there was a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being best, 1 being worst. Number 2, in some cases, scored consistent, quite a bit behind number 1, financial, for example. Then I looked at the issue of GHG reduction in global warming. Number 1 had a total of 400,000. It was given a value of 4. Number 5 had a value of 2.5 million and was given a value of 5. Almost 6 times the difference when you multiplied them out. I asked at the time and said, why is there only 1 point difference in these? There's this vast difference in GHG production. And the answer was, you make a good point. So I said, well, what will happen from that? We'll get back to you. Never did. And that was a very close difference between the 2 plants. So there has been, seemed to be, an attempt to say, this is the answer, and this is the way we will proceed. This was largely planned in isolation. It was not designed with the regional growth strategy in mind. We never talked about the regional growth strategy and the new development and what the possibilities that would bring. It wasn't, there was no discussion in the committee about the synergies and where the advantages that might be gained from redevelopment in a fairly massive scale in some cases. Simply didn't happen. The cost of this project will affect the region's ability to meet other arguably more critical challenges, such as transportation, health, homelessness, affordable housing, aging infrastructure. And that brings down into effect the question, first of all, one could argue that in some cases these are much more important. And finally, the issue of that we don't have a high-risk situation at the present time. We have the opportunity to wait for some really attractive possibilities that are coming on stream, such as the algae approach and microbial fuel cells. What we were told last meeting was the microbial fuel cells should be here within 10 years. That would allow us a result that probably will have a net better financial outcome and most certainly would have a better environmental outcome. So while we were waiting for that to move around the year 2020 to really create a much more progressive plan, we could enhance our very successful source control program. We could accelerate programs to deal with infiltration and overflows. We could create and actualize a plan to deal with the very considerable pollution that comes from stormwater. We could seek to establish a pilot for one of the emerging technologies. There are at least 2 companies right now who are looking for pilots in microbial fuel cells. What an opportunity to show that we commit to treatment, that we commit to the most advanced and globally environmentally appropriate means possible, and that we may bring Canadian companies in contact with the next step in technology. And then we can begin to plan for something that will really address concerns of global warming, the huge problem we make. I think all these steps would be positive and important, The pilot in particular would demonstrate to our partners the commitment we have to do the very best for the residents of this region, both economically and environmentally. I think as elected officials, it is our obligation to those people to provide that kind of leadership. Thank you.